The problem that I see with most training and professional development in early childhood education is usually not with the information itself. It's that it's usually all about the information. And what does that look like? It's usually a bunch of educators in a room with no windows and someone reading from a PowerPoint slide directly to them. I think most of you would agree that this is not an ideal learning environment if we want to take in that information, put it into long-term memory, and put it into actual practice. So the design elements that are part of this framework that I'm about to show you are gonna be some really obvious reminders of exactly how we know human brains learn. It takes into account social connections. It's designed for people to contribute instead of being passive consumers. It's also designed for cross-pollination to allow people to share ideas and get a richer experience. And I feel like in early childhood, we know that when you have a developing brain that is absorbing a lot of information, when that is partnered with social interaction, that learning is dialed way up. Okay, so this framework has three main components. The first phase of every workshop, training, virtual or in person, keynote, whatever it is always going to follow this exact same structure. And the idea is that at the very beginning, we have only a few seconds before we set the tone for how this workshop or experience is going to go. And let's be honest, this is our chance to immediately uncross some arms, break some of those little shells, and start getting people to feel like, hey, this might be a little bit different. Maybe I'm more willing to participate. Maybe this is going to be useful to me in my goals and in my work. What we're doing in this first step is just conditioning the room for engagement. How many of you have ever been in a workshop where you're waiting for 15 minutes for the late person to arrive? I think your time is much more valuable than that. And so immediately when people walk in, they're going to be engaging with something, usually something physical like this card deck, that allows people to talk about a primer question that I've asked about the image on the back, or the question that's on the front. Either way, they're engaged with something that's going to be tied to the learning that we're going to be doing way later. The context hook is all about the purpose and tying the goals of today and your buy-in for how you're going to contribute and participate to what you actually care about. This is 2 seconds to lay this sentence down, but it's so pivotal in getting people to mentally commit to what we're about to do so that they can have a great experience, but it can also be tied to organizational goals. The last part of this first phase is what's known as connecting before content. And this is a trick that I learned from a world-class facilitator and friend of mine, Chad Littlefield. And the idea is we're usually not ready to participate in a cheesy icebreaker, a group game, or participate and voice our opinions in a room full of new people, or even with people in a room that we may not work with all the time, or we may be feeling judged by. Just a little bit of connecting before we jump into the content allows us to set the stage for why is this important to me, what about it is useful to you, and how do our brains and teams and interactions matter when we talk about the real learning later on. Once we have started to warm them up, and usually that takes like a few minutes, like 15 minutes or so, we are able to get into the work of the session, the learning loop. And this is also comprised of 3 main parts. First, the group experience. And really, in this moment, the job of the facilitator is not to tell or deliver or instruct, but really to facilitate an experience that's going to be shared by the group. And when we do that, we now have a shared emotional experience and a shared reality, which in today's world is hugely useful if we want to collaborate, find common ground, have real conversations that are going to be productive. Once we have an experience together as a group, we're able to slowly unwind that and talk a little bit about what happened, what's useful about it, and what can we do about it in the future. Usually I use a really easy debrief. It's called a 4F debrief. You can find this anywhere on the internet. And what's great about this is that you can dive into this really, really long if you want to go deep on the learning from that lesson, or if you only have 3 minutes, you can totally do this in 3 minutes. All the 4F debrief does is ask, what are the facts? What happened out there? What are the feelings? What happened in here? what are the findings, the things that were going to be insights or are new to us that we didn't expect to happen, and what is the future? What is that future going to look like? What action will we take? Really simple framework. You can use it in any meeting. I love using this right here after a first group experience. The last part of the learning loop is story time. And one of the best ways that human beings for centuries have communicated lessons and morals and ethics has been through storytelling. And when I get to do that, it's cool because I get to reveal some of that expertise that I have that's useful in sharing. But usually when you tell a story, people see each other in the story. They see themselves in that story. And so when we share these kinds of personal reflections, it also works as a reflection for your people. They're able to see, especially right after a group experience and a debrief where they were working together, we are able to tie that to our own experiences, our own long-term memory, which allows that learning to really sink in. So this is a great, an extra nail in that lesson that helps drive that learning after the debrief and after the experience that we just had. Now, I call it the learning loop because you can go through that loop 2 or 3 times in a given session. Usually in a half day, you could do that once or twice. Usually in a full day session, you could do that 2 or 3 times, which is great. You could get a ton of learning done if you just go through that cycle a few times. Finally, the last section of a human skills workshop is the launch. And this is all about converting what's working, what's in our minds into what we actually are going to do, insights that are actionable, and then turning it into practice. The first part of that process is what's called cross-pollinating, because sometimes we have an experience and we see something that's part of that that's related to what we're thinking, but it's much richer if we have several other people who are sharing their perspectives so that we can see more clearly what lessons we might also be able to take from that. Once we have an opportunity to share some of those things and develop our insights more, we can quickly move into the action phase. I learned about action storming from my friend and world-class facilitator, Steve Gargiulo, who wrote a book on this exact idea. And the thesis basically says that, hey, we're really good at coming up with actions for other people, but not as good when we have to think about it for ourselves, because sometimes it's harder when we're in it to see clearly what we need to do. So getting people together, especially after that cross-pollination step and starting to transfer things into action, really allows us to get as much perspective and viewpoint as possible on the goals that we're trying to achieve and on the actions that are going to take to get there. It also allows us to tie some accountability to the action depending on your goals and timelines, but that's a really important opportunity there in the action storming that allows us to back that up so that we can be sure that it's actually going to happen after the workshop. Because let me tell you, I am not the cheapest option, and I know that, but I will tell you that any trainer or facilitator or speaker that you hire, if the learning or the impact stops when they leave, you are not getting enough. And I feel really strongly that the impact that this workshop has to make is so high in order for you to get an actual ROI. And the only way to do that is by making sure that the actions happen long after I'm gone. Okay, the final step here in the final phase is all about setting the intention of what we're going to do. This is a promise to ourselves, a promise to each other. This is an opportunity to tie together some of that accountability, the actions, the timelines, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, who's going to do it, all the specifics that are going to actually make this occur and actually make an impact for your organization. So this final step really helps sink in the buy-in and the commitment to that change that we all agreed we know we need and that we all agreed that we're going to make. One of the things that I want you to see in this framework that's kind of woven through it is this concept that I sort of realized I was doing after working with educators all across the country. It's be, do, and feel. And the idea is that we kind of need to know who to be. Like, it's helpful to have a character or a vision or an aspiration to target. And it's also helpful if we know what to do to get there. The final part is that these things, they're tied to behavioral reference points and aspirations. But what we know about the brain is that it helps also if we know what it feels like when it's working, and we know what it feels like when it's not working. And so those components are tied into the experiences, the debriefs, all of the learning that's happening throughout the experience so that we can make sure that we're actually going to deliver on that idea or action. Okay. So that may sound like a lot, but I have to tell you that every keynote, workshop, training, virtual, in-person is designed with this exact format. Sometimes it's longer, and it can also be compacted in order to make a shorter session be really effective. So take this. It is now in your brain. You now have access to this idea. Steal it, share it, do whatever you need to do to make it work for your organization. It's yours now. I hope that one of the things that you can see is this is designed for how human beings and human brains actually learn. And I feel so strongly that this is more important now than ever, because in an AI-powered world, my thesis and belief is that the things that we do that will be most valuable will be the most human skills that we can practice. Building trust, building a relationship, solving a problem with a parent who doesn't trust the education system, dealing with challenging personalities on your staff. These are things that an algorithm is going to have a really hard time replacing, and that human skills training is designed to address. So now you can see the design for each and every single workshop. And what you may not know is that each of these are layered together in a cumulative program that is designed to build on itself. Each session in the cumulative program focuses on one human skill that's essential in early childhood education. The sequencing of those skills is also super intentional. We know we are not going to solve all of our problems in one workshop. We know that it's going to take some time to get there, and it's going to take quite a bit of practice. So to do that, we're going to be working on those essential skills that allow us the permission, trust, collaboration, and communication techniques that are going to be essential for solving those problems later on. So what that means is that the first half of the year of a program is really designed to understand the team dynamics that exist, diagnose some of those communications and connections that we have, and then start to unburden your team with the things that don't matter and focus on some of the things that are going to be critical to high performance and the development of a strong collaborative team. Now, I know that a lot of organizations are not set up to just get a whole year's worth of training all in one shot. So this programming, because of the layering and the cumulative building effect, is designed to also be severable or pausable, which means that you can start the first session and we can add in 1 to 2 main human skills that are tied to key focus areas in your organization, so that at the end of it, if you decide this is kind of not for you, or if you decide you want to continue it on later, you can pause in that stage and still get an amazing workshop that's going to have real results that carry after I leave. At any time throughout the program, you can pause, stop, change tacks, and we can talk about what's working and what's not. So I wouldn't think of this as one big, huge decision that you have to make right now. I would think of it as a cumulative approach that's going to be layered and continuing to get you the results that you want and closer to your organizational goals as you go. If you have more questions about this, please just send me an email. I respond to every email. I'm happy to answer questions, get on a quick call to unpack some of the design elements, or to help you figure out how this is going to work in your organization with the amount of people or the types of people that you may have. Hope to see you real soon.